Hey, listen up. Yeah, we here and we locked in. Let's keep it going all the way to the top 10. We feel the turtle, so it's no other option. Fred and Ryan, just watch them. Let's take it to the max. It's the shell and tell. They come with all the facts. It's the shell and tell. Let's take it to the max. It's the shell and tell. They come with all the facts. It's the shell and tell.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shell and Tell. The season is underway. We got to see our boys. We got to see some good. We got to see some not so good. We got to see some bad. If you look at it, I walked out of the Shell a little apprehensive. I think that maybe my 8-9 win projection was a little high. But after I got back home, looked at the tape, watch the game from a different viewpoint, because down there on the field with the players, you're only getting that one view. It's not perfect for everything out there, but it's an awful lot of fun to be in Section 7. I feel a little better. Did we do what I wanted to? No. I mean, I put out a tweet before the game. I wanted to score 50 and keep them under 13. Well, the defense did their job. The offense did not put up 50. They certainly should have. We gave up some points in multiple different ways and had a horrific second quarter that you are not looking forward to against a team like Towson on the offensive side. Of course, again, the defense, now 3 games in a row without scoring a touchdown. What can you say about that? It's been a lot of fun. I thought it was a very cool matchup. I know a lot of people are like, well, why do we keep playing Towson? Why do we keep playing Navy? Loxley had a lot of talk about that, about how he kind of wants one of those games. Just, we don't want, 2, 3, 4 games a year against these local schools, because unfortunately we are not a Michigan that has a Michigan State where we can play a local school that is at our same level. They just don't exist. The best case scenario for that is the Virginia Techs, the things that we have tried to sign up on this schedule moving forward. But as far as the actual true in-state rivalries, they just don't exist here. We do not have the luxury of that. So having these lower level schools that can almost be a feeder school as you build their brand and you see how NIL works, and the fact that these kids, if they are from the DMV and are playing in these schools and can make a jump to the next level, well, maybe those are some of the kids that wanted to stay around the area and aren't just looking for a way out, because they could have maybe played at a lower level somewhere else, somewhere farther away. So I don't see a problem with building these brands, having a tune-up game. Obviously, I love to have the 2 years we played Texas right off the bat, jump off and, scare a national overly ranked team every year. That was a lot of fun, but it doesn't always work that way. And as you are building, as you have younger pieces you're trying to work in, it's nice to have a tune-up game, because you really, in this day of college football, you can't have 100% scrimmage. You can't be out there, laying out and playing like it's a game. So there are things that are just hard to practice, things that you're not going to get until the live reps, under the lights. Those things happen. I also liked how personal this was to Mike Loxley. Mike was asked about how important it was playing at his alma mater, or against his alma mater, and also how it came to be that he ended up playing for the local Towson team.
Well, one, my high school coach created the path. He knew Coach Gordy Combs at the time, who was the defensive coordinator. I was one of those late qualifiers, which is why I have an affinity for those. I see my boss back there. I was a guy that didn't have a great SAT test score. And I also came into college with a little extra luggage. I just had a son. And so it was important for me to be able to be close enough but far enough away to play a role in having a son at an early age, but obviously the opportunity to earn a degree. And like I said, going to Towson changed the lineage of my family. Very thankful for that opportunity.
First, I just want to start off, I don't know if you guys are picking this up, but watching the last couple interviews with Coach Mike Loxley, I think there's just a different comfort level for him. I don't know, maybe it was just a good PR class that he took and it's a different style that he's going with, but there's just been this like relatable thing where he is, mentioning the reporters by name, giving more personal takes, giving more like inside of his experience. Of course, he is shutting down the I'm going to give you access to the depth chart. I'm not going to answer these detailed, questions. Those are all things that it's understandable to not give someone because it can be detrimental to the team if your opponent knows these things. But what he's doing in replace of that is he's giving you these personal anecdotes, these stories, or just these vulnerabilities. I remember the last right before the Towson game, he had an interview where he says, Dustin tells me to stop saying this, as in the PR guy for the Terps football. And then he continues to say, that from a coaching standpoint, I look at it as overall in the moment. I'm not looking at individual players until I get to the tapes, blah, blah. But there's just the point of the Dustin tells me not to say this. Like, that's just something that there's this comfortability there. I see my boss in the back. I'm going to admit that, I wasn't, the grade A pupil that we always talk about. When I come to you at your desk and be like, hey, we need to make an exception in this spot for this player. That was me too. Like, it's really interesting to hear. Really cool for him to, reach out and say how thankful he is for that and the change his life. Of course, I mean, they not only gave him the chance there as a player, but as a coach later in life. Really, really changed, like you said, Michael Locksley and his whole family's direction. It's one of those moments for him that late qualifier. Well, what if you don't qualify? What changes? We can look at the importance of family and the fact that he said that he needed to be close to home because of his child. I mean, we're not going to look around and pretend we don't have multiple players on the team that are dealing with that same thing, the pressures of being a parent and a student and an athlete and trying to make better for their whole family situation. And for these aspects to be out there, I'm sure to the players already, this is what makes him so relatable. This is why he is such a good recruiter, good closer, is because he not only says it, he lived it. And there are so many coaches out here that are just blowing smoke, that are just so unrelatable, that just fell from a coaching tree and have never wanted or needed for anything. And Locksley is able to go in these living rooms and completely relate and to be there with that uncle love, that like godfather of DMV, as they call him, and be like, look, I've been here and I can be there for you, so it's easier for you this time. Well, it's one thing just to bring in these players. It's a total another to coach them up, get them in the right spot, and get this thing going in the right direction. We know Locks has been doing that the last couple of years, back-to-back bowl wins, big-time improvement in defense last year. Everybody's seen the statistics. Another thing, like we talked about, 3 games in a row now without allowing a touchdown. Hopefully that continues again this Saturday. But here is Coach Mike Locksley talking about one of the biggest parts in that building block, one of the developmental pieces that he has raised up into this system and is doing some really big things for us, Mr. Brian Williams.
I think, what's happened with B-Dub in our program is epitomizes what our program's all about. I oftentimes talk about us being a developmental program, and it's not just the players, but even the coaches. And, Brian Williams was a part of the original staff. He's a guy that's been here to see, the trajectory of our program change, and has played a major role in helping us get to where we are today. And again, I still think his best football is still ahead of him as he's become more comfortable and really helped himself on the back end with surrounding him with some great coaches. Those things really have played a major role. And, I think he's one of the shining stars in this profession, and will very soon have an opportunity to hopefully run his own program.
A lot of things to like about that statement, a lot of things to be scared about that statement. Like you said, we are a developmental program, and as these names get bigger and more desirable, it has proven very hard to hold on to them. And we're going to see another one this week. Mike Miller, who was our tight ends coach, going down to Charlotte to be offensive coordinator. Brian Williams could very well be the next one out of town, not for any negative reasons here, but because he's moving up to bigger, better things. I do think that it's going to have to be a head coaching role at this point to take Brian Williams from us. And at that point, best of luck to him. I hope it works out. Obviously, he has taken this defense to a whole other level. He has developed a bunch of 3-star athletes into NFL prospects. And it's no mistake that every year his role has expanded and this defense has gotten better. And I hope that continues for this year as well, with some big shoes to fill. Leaving for the NFL, but it's not like the cabinet is bare. We do have a very dependable pair of safeties in the backfield that I'm very excited to see play this year. Here's Mike Loxley's comments on the condition of the secondary.
The back end being a strength for us with both Bo and Dante and their game experience over the last couple of years with Bo and then Dante a year ago. And then you throw in Heeb, who has been a starter for us from the time he stepped foot on campus. I think having that type of continuity, the communication, which is really important from safety to corner, corner to safety, I think there's a huge, huge trust factor. There's a couple of things we look at as we start playing our guys and we talk to them about. One, do they perform at a high level? And two, do we trust them? And I think with all three of those guys, all three of those guys are high performance, high trust guys that are the type of leaders you want on your defense and on your team.
Those are certainly three names that I trust fully. I mean, we have been waiting for that next step. Tareeb still came in as a freshman, and we just thought that he was going to be just the next GOAT, just absolute monster. He played really well. He played well last year. He was kind of overshadowed by Deonte Banks. So that was interesting that we didn't see that next step, but maybe that next step was just kind of hidden over the obvious, first round draft pick from the Giants, who got a lot of praise this week. I don't know if anybody caught this one, but Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the top, if not the top wide receiver in all of collegiate football, was asked about the toughest cornerback that he faced, gave Deonte Banks some props, saying that he was not only the only one that he had trouble shaking in his cuts, but that he was also elite fast. Says he can't wait to match up with him again in the NFL. So that was cool to get a heads up there, or a nod from an opponent about the talents of Mr. Deonte Banks. But back to the players that are still on the field. We saw last year Bo Braid, Dante Trader kind of take over for this safeties. We had very veteran safety play before that. There was no real step back. In fact, the only real problem that we complained about last year for the safeties was that many games the safeties were leading us in tackles. Unfortunately, in this first game, again, Bo Braid led us in tackles. It's not something that I love to see in the stat sheet. I would really like to see that get under control, but that's not Bo Braid's problem. That is a thank you, Bo Braid, for saving everyone else in front of you who messed up. We also can't discount that he is sent on a lot of packages. He is sent into run coverage. So he is going to have more tackles than just the life-saving 15 yards downfield, there's no one else to beat type tackles. I'm not going to discount that. But still, I believe that our defensive ends, our linebackers, our D linemen, someone's got to edge them out on tackles every week if we truly want to take that next step towards an elite defense. Bo Braid, hard hitting in the box safety, still does pretty well on coverage. Then we got Dante Trader, who is more of the free safety coverage, deep downfield, played at a fairly high level last year, and then went over and played at a nearly all-American level lacrosse for our University of Maryland Terps lacrosse. I am excited to see what the added fluidity in the hips and all the athleticism that comes with lacrosse can translate over into this safety position. I think there's big things ahead for Dante Trader. I think it's going to be a huge development, and I hope to see him shutting down the skies and ending the deep balls against the Terps. Really, really excited to see how that goes. Again, Tareeb still is a lockdown. We had another corner position that we had to fill with Deonte Banks and Jacorian Bennett leaving the program. and we did a pretty good job. Here's Mr. Mike Loxley discussing his reaching out into the portal to get his guy.
I mean, his size, his speed, he was probably the best available corner in the transfer portal, a first team all conference guy in the AAC, and they play against some teams that throw the ball around the yard. I knew about him, as I told you, a lot of the guys in the portal were guys that we've recruited, that we have really close ties so that we know what type of character we're bringing in. That's really important to me. We'll always be a team that recruits high school first. We'll use the portal to fill needs as we've done here the last couple of years, and we've been really fortunate. But to be able to get a guy like Jaquan to come here when he could have gone anywhere in the country, I think is a testament to the things we're doing and also to what we have to offer our kids. So how he compares to Deontay Banks, I mean, they look very similar in their uniforms. I think he may be even a little bigger than Tay is, but, really pleased with the way he played in the first game for us.
Jaquan Shepard did play pretty well. It's hard to tell. They did not throw the ball. It is Towson, but there was only one 5-yard completion against him. He was targeted, I believe it was like 5 or 6 times over the game. So it's interesting. It is a spot to watch because I am fairly confident the other 3, again, played at a very high level. I do agree, one of the top, if not the top corner in the whole portal, but it is a different level playing at the Big Ten. So we will see how that translates. I think he's going to be fine. I don't foresee any problems happening there. So overall, the defense played really well. I'm not going to sit here and nitpick. I guess I can knock 2 quick things, as much as you can in a 6.2 field goal given up game. This is Towson. This is a much lower level competition, so I would have expected some turnovers. We did not get any turnovers, but also they barely threw the ball. So fumbles are more of a luck thing. Yes, you can, old Marlon Humphrey fruit punch the thing out of there, but more of a luck thing. Interceptions are definitely more of the talent and closure and be in the right place, the right time type turnover. There was a pretty nasty interception, quote unquote, made but out of bounds. And honestly, I think if it would have been a closer game, it could have been reviewed. It was very close to being inbounds, but I believe that was Bo Braid. I believe it was number 3 that pulled that down. Again, it was ruled out of bounds on review, pretty close to the sidelines. Pretty sure it would have stood whichever way they called it, and it did not go to review as far as I was aware. On the other side of the ball, things started out pretty hot. We had some players that were producing. You had Corey Dyches making big plays. You had Mr. Dependable, Deshaun Jones, making plays. He ended up for 5 for 57 and a nasty TD. Deshaun Jones this year looks to be Mr. Dependable. He looks to be the hands across the middle, the sitting in a soft zone for a first down, the, gotta have it type play situation is going to be between Deshaun Jones and Corey Dyches. These are your options. There are others that are showing promise. There are others that are showing flash. But honestly, Deshaun Jones has been there with Talia the entire time. Every year he's been there. The comfort level between these two is great. The development of Deshaun Jones from the absolute breakout, the 3 touches and 3 touchdowns in 3 different ways in Texas or at FedEx Field against Texas, to the point where we were a little frustrated with just the hot-headed, the 15-yard penalties, the things that were costing the team on top of the amazing talent that just kind of made you shake your head, like, take it to the next level. That has all been kind of erased. Some very much a more mature individual. The penalties were not a problem last year. And this year, Loxley seems to think he has taken it to a whole nother step. Let's hear his comments now.
Jay Sean, there's been some aha moments, especially from a leadership standpoint. The other day we kind of had one of those tough practices and we backed it up later that evening. And Jay Sean was one of those guys that called the team up before we started practice to kind of set the standard for, hey, look, we didn't meet our standard the last practice, and now the goal is let's come back and get better. And so that's the first time I've seen him kind of put himself in that position. It was great to see. to me, from a leadership standpoint, he's the guy in that room that those guys lean on. We've got a not necessarily just a young room, but an inexperienced room, because even with guys like Caden Prather and Tyrese Chambers coming in, they haven't had experience in the system. And I know he's really played a role of kind of coach mentality with all those guys. And I expect Jay Sean to have a big year for us.
Like I said, I do think it's a big year. I think that he's the safety blanket. He is the gotta have it, the comfort level for Talia when everything's falling apart. He finds 6. I think that there are other talented wide receivers in the room. As he mentioned, there are men that he needs to lead, men that he needs to get wrapped in and realize, like, hey, I was that guy. I was too hot-headed on the plays. I thought I knew everything, but just follow the system and it'll take you places. I really found this next comment by Coach really interesting. So he does talk about Prather and Chambers again, but really wanted to get your guys' take on it.
Yeah, the addition of guys like Caden Prather and Tyrese Chambers, one, the type of kids they are, and I use the term kids, they're young men, the type of young men that they are from a character standpoint. As I've said before, when we go into the portal and bring a guy in, it's really important for me that we know who we're bringing in and what we're getting. And with both those guys, especially Caden, because I was actively involved in his recruiting process, I knew the type of person he was, and I've been really happy with what he's done. He's kind of come in and, let the older guys that know the system help lead. I know Jay Sean Jones has played a tremendous role in that receiver room and kind of being the enforcer of our standard. And both those guys have come in and have worked their tails off, have assimilated, even have taken on some leadership roles. I think Tyrese has a natural ability as a leader because everything he's gotten, he's had to earn and work for. And those are the types of stories that when he talks to the younger players in that room, that's where I see his leadership showing up. But a really talented room, a lot of unknowns, but I say eerily similar to what the running back room looked like a year ago. I think we'll be pleasantly surprised with the production we'll get, especially out of the 2 newcomers.
What, did that catch your attention like it caught mine? Eerily similar to last year's running back room? Let's review the running back room thing from last year. Everybody was focused on the wide receivers. Everybody saw Rakim Jarrett's there, our 5-star wide receiver. We had Dante Demas, who was an all-world talent coming back from a knee injury that we still had high hopes for. We had picked up Jacob Copeland, the number 1 wide receiver out of SEC school in Florida, who had chose them over us out of high school, but then decided to come to Maryland for the next year. We were all excited about the wide receivers and not looking at this group of young, unproven running backs. And then what happened last year? The wide receivers did okay, but the show was the running backs. Roman Hemby became like one of the top in the Big Ten. Antoine Littleton was as good as any number 2 in the country. It was an awful good showing. McDonald, who we thought was going to be the number 1 out of that group because he was the one that produced the most as a freshman, was really an afterthought. I still don't know how we didn't lose him in the transfer portal. It just must be this. It must really be about the school. It must be that he thinks he can win over touches. I'm not sure. He was one of the ones that I thought almost guaranteed that we were going to lose, and I also was worried that we would lose Ramon Brown as well because he was a top-level talent that just didn't see the field behind 2 very young running backs last year. But we didn't. We lost a fullback in Joseph Burns, which sucks for goal line and sucks for short yardage situations. But, I think we'll figure it out. But eerily similar to that running back room. I mean, yes, this wide receiver room is not, we're not beating our chest and saying we got the best in the world, but Caden Prather was with WVU transfer, did big things there. Pretty excited about that. Chambers, again, he wears that number 0 on his chest because he had 0 offers come out of high school, went the JUCO route, went the FBS or FCS route. Now he's playing FBS football at the Big Ten, so that's his chip on his shoulder, but it's really right there on his chest, that number 0. Then you got Deshaun Jones coming back, a leadership role. I guess, he was looked at as the number 4 option last year. So, yeah, they're not they're flying under the radar. It's kind of like a bunch of wide receiver twos. It's kind of the outlook. Where's the wide receiver one going to come from? So eerily similar to last year's running back room, if we find a Roman Hemby in there that can be the dude in that wide receiver room, on top of all these number twos that are productive, all those running backs last year were productive when they got on the field. When McDonald got run, did well. When Ramon Brown got run, he did well. When Roman Hemby got run, he did great. When Antoine Littleton got run, he did great. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about those comments. Not to mention you have the wide receivers that are not on that top list that we are not looking at as starters. The Ty Felton returning, Octavian Smith returning. Everybody could do a little production. These new guys put up a few stats. Chambers certainly showed flashes. Only 2 for 9, but he showed good hands, quick cuts, plays low to the ground. I think he's going to become a good option out of the slot mostly. Mr. Prather, 2 for 18 and a TD. One big drop that he made kind of pedaling backwards. I think something we're going to talk about in a little bit might explain that drop a little bit, but he definitely got his hands on it, needed to make that catch. Outside of those two that we've already talked about, Octavian Smith looks like he is going to be a dog. Kick return of 34 yards, 4 for 42, and just really stood out as a reliable go-to option for Talia across the middle. Drag route seemed to be a nice specialty of his. He looks really fast. They gave it to him on the end around. Just a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing more of, especially in the kick return game. I think that he needs to be out there on punt return as well. I get Tareem Still has had a couple punt returns over the years. I do think that there is just some security in having him out there because of his defensive prowess if there were a fake punt of some kind. But Octavian Smith just seems to be so electric, and possibly as he expands his role on the kickoff return and you see more offenses, maybe we see him in that punt return spot as well, or at least in like those gotta have it late type situations where you need a field flip, you need some kind of, possibility of an electric score. Well, we can't talk wide receiver play without talking about the man getting them the ball. QB1, Talia Tagovailoa. He looked good. He got hurt way too early. We'll talk more about that. But here's Locksley talking about their focus on improvement for this year and possibly what went wrong with last year. Even though he put up the stats, it really wasn't what the fans were looking for as we focused on that loaded wide receiver room. And apparently it really wasn't what Locksley was looking for either with these latest comments.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the questions I oftentimes get about Talia is what can he do to improve? And I think I've been on the record that, last year we left some plays on the field in the deep passing game, which was something that I think is a strength of his. I attributed it last year to possibly just the timing. When you think of the receivers we had a year ago, 3 starters were coming off of injuries where they missed spring ball. Dante Demas didn't practice in the spring. Rakim Jarrett didn't practice. Jacob Copeland was limited. And so I don't think we ever really got the timing down. And there were times where there were open guys and we mishit or didn't hit them accurately. There were times where we maybe missed the read. So after you review and go through kind of the quality control of what we can do better, that was the one area in Leah's game that we thought we needed to improve. And so what you do is you go about figuring out, setting up individual drill work. Some of it is footwork for him in the back end and making sure that he's got his eyes in the right place and that the ball has the right trajectory where you throw guys open. I thought Saturday, obviously he had the big one that was dropped and then came back and, had a couple of drops on some deep shots where I thought he threw the ball where we wanted it to be thrown with the type of trajectory. So worked really hard. Josh, continues to drill him quite a bit and you see the fruits of the work.
Couple of balls that were dropped where he threw it where he wanted it to be thrown. Well, 2 of them right off the bat, one clearly was our deep ball to Ty Felton in the beginning of the game that should have been 6 points. Ended up stalling that drive. Another one to Ty Felton late in the game, though he did pick up a pass interference on that play. The ball did hit him in the hands. It would have been a drop if there was no pass interference call. So I guess that's not one of the ones he's talking about. Another one that was a deeper ball, probably 20, 25 yards downfield, was to Caden Prather. And that's the one where there was some discussion between myself and John Googs from Inside the Black and Gold about who was responsible for that drop there, because the ball did seem underthrown. But going back and looking at it, I still stick to my guns that the ball was thrown where it needed to be, and the wide receiver did not sit down in the zone where he was supposed to be. The wide receiver had made it behind the linebacker. There was a safety coming over top, and to me, Talia made the decision to float it into the zone where he was wide open, 10 yards, both sides. But if he would have led him and kept running, then it would have been back into coverage of the safety. I do think that that's one of those ones where that's going to get fixed. There was some jawing from Prather later in the game where it looked a little animated, but Talia's reaction to it was good. He grabbed him by the shoulder, he talked him through, and it seems to calm everything down. So I think there's just some miscommunications there, seeing different things in the offense. I'm sure with Prather being new to the system, that those things are going to get worked out. He is a big-time wide receiver, and hopefully by the time we get to Big Ten play, he will be on the same page and tearing people apart. We talked about Leah getting a little banged up early. I can't talk about the quarterback without the guys that are supposed to keep him standing up. The offensive line we knew was going to be our biggest question this year. Continues to be the biggest question. I talked a little bit earlier. I kind of left the stadium shaking my head a bit, thinking that we were an offensive line away from being a great team and that we could end up being a bad team if they were as bad as I thought they were. In that moment, when you start the game and before the very first touchdown, Lee has already taken a hard hit, clearly injured his left arm in some way, appears to be a stinger of some kind, but bothered him the whole game. You saw his left arm hanging. You saw him guarding it after a touchdown celebration. You saw him stretching his hand and shaking that left arm throughout the entire game. Went from drive one, where he took a hit, all the way till he was removed in the third quarter. But Leah says he feels great. Now, is that all on the offensive line? Coach Locks has said no. Coach Locks said that Leah is holding on to the ball too long, extending plays. It's that competitive nature of his that wants him to make every play work, but where they're trying to coach it out of him that you can lose this play and live to play again. Get to the next play and make it happen in a better circumstance. He did have 3 throwaways in this game. Probably needed to get about 6 so that he could stop taking those hits. There also were some late chippy shots that, you're not going to be able to avoid that. If you get the ball out, you think you're not going to take a hit, and this team's going to hit you anyway. That's going to be on the refs, and that's going to be on the other team, because sometimes 15 yards is worth, knocking up the starting quarterback a little bit. So who knows? But here's Mike Locksley discussing the offensive line rebuild with only one remaining starter on our offensive line.
And though we lost a lot of production in terms of an experience up front in the O-line, we feel like the portal has allowed us to maybe fill some of those gaps that have been created when you lose players to the NFL like we did a year ago. Our O-line, obviously, losing 2 guys to the draft and another one, Jahari Branch, who's actively on the roster, shows you that that's the one area that we've got to kind of see and make some decisions quickly as you go through our depth chart, because that competition there with the guys we brought in along with the returning guys makes that room, makes healthy competition really important in that room.
Yeah, you were able to bring in guys from the portal. That's great. But you lost guys to the NFL. You lost 2 draft picks, another one in a camp, and you lost a 4th that we just aren't going to talk about in Mason Lunsford to LSU. I Did we get some of the top linemen in the transfer portal? Sure, but there weren't a bunch of linemen in the transfer portal. Both these guys are having to play at a higher level. Technically got a transfer from Duke, so I guess you can call it Power 5, but really he played for Elon last year. He went to Duke for spring ball and spring ball only. Then you have another one out of Division II Frostburg. Sure, he's got NFL grades, but he's got NFL grades against Division II talent. So will it work? Won't it work? I don't know. Loxley seems to think they have more ready pieces this year than last year. They said they had about 7 offensive linemen that were ready for gameplay last year, and he has about 8 or 9 this year. That's yet to be seen. That's not against Big Ten talent that they've seen any of it. And at this point, I'm not so sure. I do think that some of the problems that I saw in stadium that had me really sad about the offensive line production ended up not being the offensive line. I will agree with Loxley. There were 2 to 3 plays where Talia needed to get rid of the ball. He had a good pocket. There was nothing downfield. He didn't, tuck and run. He just kind of scrambled in circles, or he tried to run up into the pocket that just didn't work correctly. That's one thing. The second thing is there were some plays ran that worked last year that just don't work now, or at least with the players that were put into the situation. Running backs or linemen are not only there for the quarterback, they're also there for the running backs. And there were some holes that just didn't exist, some lack in the running game that would have been big plays last year. There was one ISO play in particular that I watched it was drawn up perfectly. We had head-on-head across the board. Offensive guard takes the player to the right, the tackle takes the player to the left, and the tight end is pulled into the middle to take the last remaining middle linebacker, and it should have been green grass all the way up until the cornerback 10 yards off the ball. But as good as Corey Dyches is at what he does, he is not CJ Dupree. He is not even Chigokonkwo when it comes to blocking, that is. These things, he is a wide receiver in a bigger body. These big-time blocks, he came through that hole and hit a linebacker like the linebacker was a brick wall. I just don't think that putting him in that situation is good for him or the team. I think they're going to have to find a different place to put him in that lineup, a different person to put in those wing-type blocking situations, whether it be you run out there, Antoine Littleton in the wing and Roman Hemby in the backfield and let Littleton make the block, or whether it be Husbands or one of these backup tight ends that we haven't really seen develop yet. But Corey Dyches is a lead blocker. It's a one-off. Maybe he does develop. Maybe it was just bad technique in the moment. Maybe he got surprised and didn't see the player. But we knew it wasn't his strength to start with, and the first option we got to see of it, it ended up being, instead of one defender in the way, there was now an offensive and defensive player in the way, bogged it down for like a 3-yard gain. Last year, that's 10 to 15 yards, like without a doubt in my brain. It would have been a bigger body taking all that block, and it would have been wide open. It's good to see the blocking scheme is working. But yes, I think they're going to have to figure out, because the linebackers are only going to get bigger. They're only going to get stronger from here. You had a couple good defenders on that team, so maybe it was comparable, but you're not going to get any worse. You're not going to get any light, movable objects in there for him. So I do think that needs to be fixed. Overall, I'm not very excited about the offensive line. But there were plenty of excuses for it. You had your projected starting right tackle out of the portal out for this game. He is back at practice. No word yet on whether he'll play against Charlotte or they'll be held out one more week for the higher level competition at Virginia. You also had players just shuffling in and out just constantly, just mid-drive, moving centers, moving guards. You had a extreme heat in the stadium that they had not had in all of fall camp. These big guys are usually affected more than the other players on the field. So I'm going to give them a pass. After seeing the issues that weren't all on them, I'm hoping that the offensive coordinators take care of the, player-driven issues, the wrong player for the wrong job type situation, where we could not cut and paste our number one tight end into what last year's number one tight end did. We don't seem to speak at all about players that leave the program. As you'll see coming up, Loxley has a chance to talk about, I believe it's 6 players that are now playing for Charlotte we don't talk about, and we haven't mentioned CJ Dupree. When he talks about losing offensive linemen, he never mentions that we lost them into the portal. He only talks about ones going to the NFL. So there is some selective conversation here, but CJ Dupree is the starting tight end for Alabama. It was a big loss. Do we have the offensive replacement in Corey Dyches? Sure, but CJ Dupree is a huge loss, and we are going to see it in some way, shape, or form. You cannot cut and paste Corey Dyches into his exact same role, and I believe they found that out this week, and it will be fixed. Now let's talk about things I am excited about. They continue to upgrade this stadium experience. If you are on the sidelines, if you are sitting at home watching on television, pick a game and go to it. You need to go out. If you've seen a Maryland game before, really even this year, you haven't seen a Maryland game. If you saw a game before last year, you definitely have not seen a Maryland game. The screen absolutely changed the game. If you saw it the year before, they had put in the whole Jones Hill House that helped close in and beautify the whole stadium there, and the tunnel entrance. Every year, the upgrades are absolutely massive. Last year, the screen was cool, but they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't have the production for it. The audio quality was awful. It was different every game. I'm telling you, they have it all fixed this year. The audio is perfect. There were a couple songs they played where the whole stadium turned into like a giant bass. You just felt it vibrating through your chest. The visuals are great. The advertisements are great. The just like fan engagement things. Also, this was a 3:30 game, so it was bright and sunny the whole game, but they were running their new fancy light system, their color-changing LED, kind of getting a dry run for these next 2 night games coming up. The yellow, red, white, it's going to be a visual, entertaining experience. We finally have them investing money into what it is. We are competing for entertainment dollars. This is not just about winning and losing. Yes, we need them to win to keep people coming, but those same people can watch on television. You need the experience to be overwhelming to get you to get out of your house, get in the car, drive down, pay for parking, get into the stadium, and enjoy yourself. It's a full-blown experience, and I cannot wait for these light shows to take it to a whole nother level. This Saturday will be good. Hopefully the next Friday even better, because my real thing I want to see is this entrance in the dark. It wasn't quite dark. It was, dawn or dusk, as we left at 7 o'clock for the last game. So as we get later into the year, hopefully we got a couple more 7 o'clock games in us and really see everything they have to offer and all their toys, all the bells and whistles. The flag drop has been taken to a whole nother level. Again, just get down there. There's no way I could give it justice if you haven't seen it for yourself. Get down, get into the stadium, and enjoy a game with your friends and family. Do yourself a favor. Loxley was asked about some of the in-game developments, including his recent ad singing and acting for the team. Here are his comments.
All of us, our marketing team over there in Xfinity, they've won a ton of awards there. They do their part to try to get people to want to come see us. Now we just need our fans to continue to come support us and do it for 4 quarters. But the marketing team over there, led by Kerry Blankenship and our guy Looney, Jordan Luby, and that staff over there. They come up with these ideas, and obviously I'm very gullible. I want to do what I can to fill the shell. And so if me singing off key and the air of the night gets people in the stands, I'll do whatever I need to do.
They're doing whatever they need to do, and you need to do whatever you need to do. Now, like Loxley said, continue to support the team, because honestly the numbers for Towson looked good. The bottom bowl was pretty much full. There was a decent number of people up top. Creighton Prather was asked about the atmosphere in for game day here. He had some very glowing things to say. He said when it first came out, it was really booming. It was exciting, and then he came out at halftime, and he was like, "What happened?" Well, it's just this thing that's became acceptable here that we come to partial games. I've never understood it. We've talked about it here on the show before. One time did I ever leave a game early, and it wasn't football related. It was things that we had to take care of as a family. But people come for basically second and third quarters. There's a lot of those people that show up from the tailgates late, leave for the parking lots early. I don't really understand that. It was good. It was fun seeing everybody there to the first half. I get how hot it was. That is probably a large part of why everyone left. The student section looked absolutely great until halftime. The student section needs to stay. You guys are the youngest, fittest, healthiest individuals there. There's no reason that Little Heat should have kicked you out of that stadium. So hopefully we do better next week. Hopefully it's a more entertaining brand of football, some more offense, because that second quarter did drag, and that is the team's fault. There was plenty of fan support there ready to explode, and they just didn't do it for us. So with that, let's let Loxley introduce the next opponent.
Charlotte's coming in, a national TV game here in the Shell at night. Familiar opponent that we played a year ago. Obviously, they've got a new coaching staff that we're very familiar with. Coach Poggi, who I don't just call an opponent. He's also a dear friend. He coached my son in high school. My son Kai played for Biff there at Gilman. So I've known Biff for a long, long time and got a lot of respect for him and the job he does as a coach in developing young men. I know our fans will come out and create the environment that we want to have for a Saturday night national TV game, and we're very hopeful that we can pack the Shell.
Again, talking about packing the Shell. That's important. Get out there, get your tickets, get down there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have our 12 packed out. Still working on tailgate, figuring out what that's going to be. But you all catch the positive vibes on Biff? Like, I know you're supposed to say these things, but this feels like more than what you're supposed to say. I don't think that the general Maryland fan has these same warm and fuzzies for Biff. So much so that I think I'm going to let Loxley clarify his comments again.
Yeah, I've known Biff probably since about 1997, 98 when I came here as a young assistant, and he was coaching over at Gilman. We recruited his school for some time. When I came back here in 2012, my son ended up going to Gilman and played 3 years there for Coach Poggi, and he did a tremendous job creating value for my son, where he was able to sign with Texas coming out of high school, and great education there at Gilman. And Biff is one of those guys that's similar to myself. He's not just about developing them as football players, but developing them as people, and I know he develops really strong relationships, and through that he and I have become great friends, as well as obviously now competitors, and looking forward to it. I know he'll have his team ready to come play up here. It's kind of a homecoming for him and some of the players on his roster. When you look across and see the amount of guys that are there with him that he had in high school, and those guys were really good players. So we expect him to come up and give us his best, and then he can expect to get ours.
I couldn't be more confused. Look, I get the tie with your son and the positive thoughts there. I guess that is where we're at, but there's been an awful lot of negative talk from Maryland fans about Biff Poggi through his entire time at St. Francis. Maybe there was a better relationship with University of Maryland before he was at St. Francis Academy, but St. Francis, by the general Maryland football fan, was just seen as a Michigan feeder school, like maybe a little Tennessee, like funded by Michigan was the overall thought process by the Maryland fans of what St. Francis Academy was. Now maybe there's really not a relationship between Maryland and Biff Poggi. Maybe the relationship is only between Michael Loxley and Biff Poggi, and maybe I'm just kind of not lining up the years right, and the years that we let Loxley leave to go to Alabama were the years where he was just completely ignoring us and not letting us have any of the talent, and that when Loxley came back, maybe that St. Francis was giving us more talent, it still felt like the tier 2 of St. Francis for the most part, and it still felt like Biff Poggi was the one doing it. As we talked earlier, Loxley said that his high school coach set him up to go to Towson. The coaches matter. This is not just a player decision, not to mention all the things that go along with Biff Poggi and the McDonald's bags that were, being dropped off for students before there ever was an NIL deal. Biff Poggi's a polarizing character. I could see how one would really like him, and I could see how a lot of players and fans really hate him. I don't know. I'm going to be interested. I don't think that Biff's going to get a warm and fuzzy reaction from the fans of Maryland. I think that this is a Coach K in the making if things go poorly for the Terps against Charlotte. There's already some built-in hatred for what he has seemingly done to the program. Maybe it's all in our heads, but that's what we are. Fan short for fanatic. So it will be very interesting to see the reaction, to see that the players that left and how aggressive and chippy this becomes, whether there was a lot of hate related to the departures or whether they just came to realization that they were not going to play at this Big Ten level and that they wanted to go somewhere that they could have the playing time and develop more on game days. Not only do they have the 6 players, some of my favorite players down there, Joseph Burns left our fullback position, which again could have really used. He could have laid that block a lot better than Corey Dyches this last week. He was the lone loss out of the running back room, which was really interesting since he was the only fullback, and we had a very loaded running back room that I thought maybe we were going to lose someone that was going to hurt. Joseph Burns, not only did he leave our running back room, but he is listed as a tight end down there. He is not even playing running back because my theory at that point was, well, maybe he doesn't want to be a fullback. Maybe he really wants to be the lead guy. He wasn't a tight end in high school. I'm sure they used him a little bit that way. He was a fullback. As coach has said, Biff Poggi likes to run the ball. So I'm surprised he isn't used as a lead blocker. So we'll just see that. Ja'Kai Green was somebody that I really thought was going to be a developmental piece out of St. Francis. I thought that he could possibly be into a starting rotation this year or next for the Terps. We've lost him. Austin Fontaine, who played plenty of years down here, and then he got sick and lost all that weight, and I think he just needed another spot to get a couple years in. He's gone down there with him as well. There's also a defensive back that I had seen that we'll be playing against, but it will be interesting. Biff is an aggressive character, whether it's just a character, whether it's just a way to get national media attention. I will be interested to see if that translates into a dirty game. I could see it very much going that way, and I don't understand or believe these friendship comments if that's the way that this goes. I think that if Deion Sanders wasn't hired at Colorado, Biff Poggi would be more of a talking point because he is as brash and disagreeable as Deion. He just doesn't have this big a name. So since we already have that to talk about, we don't need to talk any further about Biff Poggi's negative comments in his media day, talking trash about you already picking us to finish last. All the same things that Deion does, Biff's been doing for years as well. So it's going to be interesting. And again, this is one of those personal comments, one of these like deep takes that Loxley's offered in these media sessions that really gives the media what they want. They give them things to talk about, gives them the inside aspects, some, instead of just repeating facts, repeating stats, gives them something to write about. And I think it's really helping in the total of the people attending, the people writing, the attention the team's getting. And I hope this continues. Well, Loxley, speaking about old friends, this next question comes from an old friend of the show here, Mr. Ahmed Gafir. I'm going to let him go ahead and ask this question.
Hey, Coach. I know you had talked about just playing a lot of players, obviously, but going into this upcoming week, there'll be some familiarity with the roster. Obviously, I believe it's 6 players who played here last year who are now in Charlotte. But when you watch Game 1, what kind of jumped out, whether it's from a player perspective or kind of scheme?
Yeah, Game 1 for them, I don't coach their team, but it looked like they didn't show a lot. I mean, they didn't have to necessarily, I guess, get into too deep into their game plan. When you watch the tape, I think they had 68 snaps on defense, and they were in some base man-free stuff. But when you do your research, as we've done over the summer, with our summer scouting report, we're expecting to play more split safety than maybe post-safety stuff that they showed a week ago. On the offensive side of the ball, again, they were very limited game plan. They were able to get their stuff executed. If you know Biff, he wants to run the football. He wants to play downhill. He's kind of one of those guys that wants to make it a tough, gritty game, and that's what we expect. Again, the familiarity. Obviously, they've got Mike Miller, a former assistant here, who's been with me for some time. There is some familiarity from a personnel standpoint. You look across their roster, and they've got, I want to say, 25, 30 guys from Power 5 institutions, so they've been able to flip their roster, and they've got some really talented players in all 3 phases.
We're not going to talk about transfers. It's just not what we do here. So Locks was able to flip that question about the familiarity of the personnel, his ex-players playing down there for Biff Poggi, and turn that into he has 25 new players from across Power 5 institutions. But again, it's cool. If that's just your answer is that we don't talk about players that transfer. I do find it interesting that you are willing to talk about coaches that transfer. I don't know if there is some kind of rule about not talking about other people's players. It seems like that would make sense. Maybe there's some kind of, tampering or, manipulating type rule that would just, even though it's talking about an ex-player of yours, it's still someone else's player. Maybe he's trying to avoid that. I'm not really sure. I do know that we had very positive thoughts about Mike Miller. I thought he was going to be our future offensive coordinator. He didn't seem to be ready for that at this level, I guess, according to Loxley and people related. So he has stepped it down a level to take over that offensive coordinator role. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see these guys back in the shell on the other side, whether they just are extra motivated, cool, or whether it is just dirty. And we should find that out pretty quick. Ahmed didn't exactly get his answer that he was looking for there. But if you want the answers from Ahmed, make sure that you are checking out the Young Terps podcast. Young Terps Reloaded is now their title. They might need to rebrand even further. It is so far from the old Young Terps with Mason and his brother. They have improved on all their technical recording. Mason and Ahmed now bringing you multiple shows a week, including shows directly from CQ Stadium inside the shell immediately after the game. They are recording there. It's a very cool step in the right direction. Team Ahmed all the way inside the black and gold. Get your stuff. He has been supporting Maryland football more than anyone else before it was cool to support Maryland football. When Ahmed was covering football for us, we didn't have point spreads like this weekend. We're 24-point favorites. It shouldn't be that big of a scare, but then again, Towson shouldn't have been as close as it was last week either. We should have scored way more points against the Towson Tigers. So who knows what's going to happen. I can tell you there were some things we didn't do so well last week that we're going to have to worry about this week. Let's let Coach Loxley address one of those things now.
Yeah, a lot of Towson's yards came from the quarterback scramble, and as I talked about, after the game, he's containing a running quarterback, and that will be something we'll have to deal with. They got a really athletic quarterback in number 1, Jalen Jones, who, with the zone read games and the QB runs, which we expect to see because it adds an extra blocker for them. That's something to be concerned for, something that we expect and we're preparing for. QB runs, like I said, give them a numbers advantage when you try to load the box. So what we got to do is be really gap sound. We've got to do a good job of getting off blocks. We've got to do a great job of containing him because a lot of the runs that we faced a week ago that had success came off of drop back passes and maybe rushing too far up the field and not level rushing the quarterback that allows the defense to kind of contain him inside the pocket. We've got to do a better job this week. I think we had 12 loss of contains in the game last week, and for us, I see losing contain is a lot like turnovers on offense, and so that's something that we definitely have to get fixed from game 1 to game 2.
Yeah, the rushing quarterback hurt us, but as Loxley said, they were very different type of rushes. There were definitely bailouts, like nothing's available downhill. I escaped the pocket and got more yards than he should have been able to get. There should have been someone that caught that and someone with the closing speed to stop that quarterback. It was unacceptable, but it's a different kind of issue than we're going to face. We also were unprepared for it. As Loxley said, we are preparing for a mobile quarterback this week. Last week was the fault and failure of the defensive ends, basically. That's who's losing contain. This week, not only will you not want to do that, you will not want to lose contain, but because they are going to be more designed runs, because they are going to be something you're expecting, you're also probably going to have a linebacker involved. Also, more of a QB spy type situation, someone responsible for the quarterback more often than just keep him inside the pocket. Like, watch where he is at all times. I think things are going to go fine. I'm excited to see what goes on. As Mike Loxley always says, the biggest jump is from week 1 to week 2 in improvements. So hopefully we see these guys absolutely come out here and steamroll a higher level of competition than we saw last week. And we forget all our negative feelings about last week, because I'm still hoping to go to the shoe 5-0. I still think it's an option. Whether that opinion changes after this game, it very well could, because based off of what I saw last week, we wouldn't do it. But I do think that there are some promising things that can be changed, that can be coached up, that can be manipulated. These are not players that are having to get better. These are situations we're going to have to put ourselves in that are better. And I think we can do that. Those are the type of things you can develop. Well, that's another one for me, guys. I am excited to get down there and tailgate. What can be better? 3 games in 13 days. Let's go. Terps football in the house. Until next time, here's to wishing all is well under the show.